Long before she was a ghost ship, she was known as the Amazon. Built in Nova Scotia in 1861, she seemed born under a dark star. On her very first voyage, her captain fell ill and died. A few months later, she collided with another ship in the English Channel. Her owners began to whisper that the timber used to build her had come from a haunted forest. They sold her, renamed her the Mary Celeste, but you can repaint a ship, but you cannot wash away its luck. By 1872, the ship was under the command of Captain Benjamin Briggs. Briggs was a man of God, a teetotaler, and a seasoned sailor. He wasn't a man given to ghost stories. He brought along his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. To him, this wasn't just a merchant voyage, it was a family journey across the sea to Italy. November 7, 1872. New York Harbor was cold and gray. The Mary Celeste was loaded with 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol. As they pulled away from the pier, Captain Briggs waved to his friends. It was a picture of peace. 7 crewmen, hand-picked for their experience, manned the sails. Sarah Briggs had brought her melodeon, a small piano, to play hymns in the evenings. The ship was tight, the cargo was secured, and the wind was fair. But as they passed the Statue of Liberty, the fog began to swallow the hull. It would be the last time anyone saw the Briggs family alive. 1 month later, on December 5, 1872, another ship called the Dei Gratia was sailing between the Azores and Portugal. Its captain, David Morehouse, was a friend of Captain Briggs. He spotted a silhouette on the horizon. Through his spyglass, he saw the Mary Celeste. "Something is wrong," Morehouse muttered. The sails were set strangely. The ship was yawing, moving back and forth as if no one was at the helm. Morehouse ordered a small boat to be lowered. 3 sailors rowed toward the silent giant. As they climbed the side, the only sound was the creaking of the wood and the slapping of the waves. "Hello!" they shouted. Only the wind answered. What the sailors found on deck haunts historians to this day. The ship was in nearly perfect condition. There was plenty of food and water for 6 months. The crew's clothing was neatly folded in their chests. Sarah Briggs's sewing machine sat on the table, a half-finished garment still tucked under the needle. In the galley, a pot of oatmeal was still warm on the stove. Cups of tea sat on the table, now cold but undisturbed. It looked as if the entire crew had simply been teleported off the ship in a single second. But then they noticed the missing items. The lifeboat was gone. The captain's navigational instruments, the sextant and the chronometer, were missing. And the logbook, the final record of the ship's journey, had its last entry dated 10 days earlier. The logbook was open on the captain's desk. The handwriting was steady. It placed the ship near the island of Santa Maria in the Azores on November 25th. There was no mention of a storm, no mention of a fire, no mention of a mutiny. The last words were mundane: weather fair, wind shifting. 10 days had passed between that entry and the discovery. 10 days where the Mary Celeste sailed herself through the treacherous waters of the Atlantic, guided by a phantom hand, while her crew drifted somewhere in the dark abyss of the ocean. As the Dei Gratia crew searched deeper, they found a sword under the captain's bed. When they pulled it out, they saw dark stains on the blade. Was it blood? Had the crew turned on the captain? They also found a strange gash in the wood of the hull, as if someone had tried to cut their way out, or something had tried to cut its way in. The alcohol barrels were checked. 9 of them were empty. Morehouse decided to split his crew. They would sail both ships to Gibraltar to claim the salvage reward. But as they sailed the Mary Celeste into port, the people on the docks didn't cheer. They stared in silence. They knew a death ship when they saw one. When the Mary Celeste finally groaned into the harbor of Gibraltar, she didn't bring answers. She brought a storm of suspicion. The British authorities were not convinced by the ghost story. To them, the scene was too clean, too perfect. The Attorney General, Solly Flood, was a man who didn't believe in phantoms. He looked at the Dea Gratia crew, the men who found the ship, and saw pirates. "How convenient," Flood whispered during the inquiry, "to find a friend's ship, perfectly preserved, and claim a fortune in salvage money. Perhaps the crew isn't missing. Perhaps they are at the bottom of the sea, sent there by your own hands." For months, the Mary Celeste sat in the harbor like a prisoner. Divers went under her hull, looking for signs of a collision or an attack. They found nothing. The ship was as sound as the day she was built. The investigation turned into a trial of shadows. As the news reached America and London, the public began to conjure their own explanations. In 1872, the ocean was still a place of ancient terrors. "Giant squid," the sailors whispered in the taverns. They spoke of the kraken, a beast from the depths that could reach its tentacles over the railing and pluck a man from the deck without leaving a scratch. It would explain the lack of struggle. It would explain why the table was still set. The monster didn't want the ship, it wanted the flesh. But even a monster leaves a trail. There were no suction marks on the wood, no slime on the deck. The giant squid theory remained a nightmare of the superstitious, but it couldn't explain the missing lifeboat. Then a more scientific but equally terrifying theory emerged. Remember the 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol? When the investigators counted them, 9 were empty. Industrial alcohol is volatile. In the heat of the Atlantic, some of those barrels might have leaked. The fumes would have built up in the hold, invisible, odorless, and highly explosive. Imagine Captain Briggs. He opens the hatch to check the cargo, and a cloud of toxic, flammable gas hits him in the face. He panics. He knows one spark, one strike of a match would blow his wife and child into the sky. "To the boat! Everyone to the boat!" he might have screamed. They lowered the small lifeboat, tethering it to the Mary Celeste with a long rope, intending to wait for the gas to clear. But then the wind changed. A sudden gust caught the Mary Celeste's sails. The rope snapped like a thread. The crew sat in a tiny, overloaded boat, watching their only home sail away into the mist. But Solly Flood, the prosecutor, had a darker thought. He focused on that stained sword under the bed. He imagined a night of red fury. Did the crew break into the alcohol? Did 7 sailors, driven mad by the spirit, kill Captain Briggs? Did they throw Sarah and little Sophia overboard to stop their screams? But there was a problem with this theory. The crew were experienced, professional men with families of their own. And if they had committed a massacre, why leave the money? The captain's safe was full of gold. The crew's valuables were still in their chests. Sailors kill for gold, not for silence. As the months dragged on, a new rumor surfaced. Some believed the Mary Celeste had drifted too close to a shifting island, a sandbar that appears and disappears with the tides. The theory was that the ship ran aground. Thinking she was sinking, the crew abandoned her. But as the tide rose, the Mary Celeste floated free, drifting away, while the crew remained trapped on a disappearing island of sand, waiting for a rescue that never came until the ocean swallowed them whole. Every theory had a hole. Every explanation left a question. The Mary Celeste was a riddle wrapped in silk and salt. And as the investigation in Gibraltar ended, the ship was released, but she was forever branded. No sailor wanted to touch her. To step on her deck was to step into a grave. What happened to the 10 souls in that missing lifeboat? The Atlantic is 4 miles deep in that region. Even in a calm sea, a small boat is a speck of dust. If they were out there, they saw the sun rise and set until the water ran out. They looked at each other with the same hunger that haunted the Donner Party. No debris was ever found, no life jacket, no oar, no body. The ocean kept them, perhaps as a tribute. But the story was about to take one final bizarre turn.
thanks to a young doctor who would later become the world's greatest mystery writer.
By 1884, the mystery of the Mary Celeste had begun to fade into old maritime records, but it was brought back to life by a young, unknown doctor named Arthur Conan Doyle, the man who would later create Sherlock Holmes. He wrote a short story called J. Habakkuk Jephson's Statement, based on the Mary Celeste. However, he changed the name to the Mary Celeste and added dramatic, fictional details, like a half-eaten breakfast still warm on the table. The world believed his fiction was fact. This is where the legend truly began. People started believing in impossible scenarios, mass madness, a secret assassin on board, or a supernatural portal. Doyle's story made the ship a global icon of the macabre. But while the public enjoyed the ghost stories, the real mystery remained. What was the physical force that drove a veteran captain off his perfect ship? Fast forward over 100 years to the modern day. Scientists at University College London decided to solve the riddle using 21st century technology. They built a replica of the Mary Celeste's hold and filled it with butane gas, simulating the leaking alcohol barrels. They triggered an explosion. What they saw was incredible. A pressure wave explosion occurred, a massive, sudden flash of blue flame. But here was the catch. This type of explosion creates intense heat and a terrifying sound, but it lasts for only a fraction of a second. It doesn't leave scorch marks. It doesn't set the wood on fire. Imagine Captain Briggs again. He hears a thunderous roar from below. He sees a blue flame lick the air around the hatch. He thinks the ship is seconds away from disintegrating. In that moment of pure, blinding terror, he makes the call to abandon ship. He didn't know the danger had passed as quickly as it came. He ran from a ghost of fire right into the jaws of the Atlantic. But what of the Mary Celeste itself? The ship survived its crew, but it couldn't survive its reputation. For the next 12 years, she changed hands 17 times. Every owner went bankrupt. Every crew reported hearing footsteps on the deck at night or seeing a woman in a white dress standing near the bow. In 1885, her final captain, a desperate man named Gilman Parker, decided to commit insurance fraud. He loaded her with junk, insured it as valuable cargo, and intentionally ran her onto a coral reef near Haiti. But even then, the ship refused to go quietly. The wreck didn't sink properly. Parker was caught, his reputation ruined, and he died in poverty shortly after. The Mary Celeste was left to be reclaimed by the sea, her timber slowly rotting under the Caribbean sun, a graveyard for the secrets she carried. In 2001, legendary explorer Clive Cussler found the remains of the Mary Celeste, but there were no answers waiting in the silt, only rusted nails and petrified wood. The story of the Mary Celeste remains the ultimate sleep story because it taps into our deepest fear, the fear of the unknown. It reminds us that no matter how much we think we control our world with our compasses, our engines, and our logic, the ocean is vast and it is silent. As you drift off to sleep tonight, think of the Mary Celeste. Somewhere out in the Atlantic, the wind still catches the sails of phantom ships. The water still holds the echoes of Captain Briggs' last command, and Sophia's melodeon still plays a silent hymn in the depths of the abyss. The Mary Celeste was found with 10 people missing. To this day, not a single bone, not a single piece of clothing has ever been found. They didn't die on the ship. They died in the gap between the ship and the shore. They are the eternal travelers. They are the souls of the silent voyage. And as the waves lap against the shore tonight, remember, some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They are meant to be felt. Sleep well, and may your voyage be peaceful.
To understand the fear, we must imagine the nights on the Mary Celeste before she was found. Imagine the sound of the Atlantic, not the waves you see from the beach, but the black, bottomless water of the deep ocean. The sailors on the Dei Gratia reported that when they stood on the deck of the Mary Celeste, the wind didn't whistle through the rigging, it moaned. One sailor, John Johnson, whispered to his mates that he felt eyes on the back of his neck. He walked into the crew's quarters, expecting to find someone sleeping, but found only the indentation of a head on a pillow that was cold to the touch. The silence of a ghost ship isn't a lack of noise, it is a heavy, suffocating presence that tells you that you are trespassing in a place where humans no longer belong. Sarah Briggs was a woman of culture. She didn't want to leave her life in Massachusetts, but she loved Benjamin. On the ship, she was the only woman. Think of her sitting at her small melodeon in the evenings, the candlelight flickering as the ship tossed on the waves. The music she played would have been the only thing keeping the sailors from the brink of madness. But when the Dei Gratia crew found the instrument, it was open. The keys were dusty. There were reports that during the night, as the ship was being towed back to port, the music of a faint hymn could be heard drifting from the cabin, even though no one was inside. Was it the wind, or was it the memory of a woman who refused to believe her journey had ended? Why does the human mind fear the Mary Celeste more than a shipwreck? Because in a shipwreck there is an ending, there is debris, there are bodies to bury. But with the Mary Celeste, there is only a question mark. For the families left behind in New York, the pain was a slow burn. Captain Briggs's son, Arthur, had stayed behind for school. For the rest of his life, he stared at the horizon. Every time a ship sailed into harbor, he looked for his father's face. He represents the millions of listeners today who are haunted by the great Unsolved. This story isn't about a boat, it's about the thin line between being here and being gone. In the late 1800s, spiritualism was at its peak. Mediums in London and New York claimed they could speak to the spirits of the Mary Celeste. They spoke of a zone of silence in the Atlantic, a place where the laws of physics don't apply. Some claimed the crew saw a mirage of a city in the clouds and walked off the deck in a collective trance. Others spoke of the sea fog of forgetfulness. While modern science scoffs at these, for a listener lying in bed in the dark, these theories pull at the edges of reality. What if the crew didn't leave? What if they are still there, standing just outside our field of vision, forever sailing a ship they can no longer touch? As the moon sets over the Atlantic, we leave the Mary Celeste behind. Her wood has long since rotted, her gold-leafed Bible lost to the salt. But her story is the first of many. For every ghost ship, there is a lost city. For every missing crew, there is a civilization that walked into the mist and never returned. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, remember the Mary Celeste. She is proof that the world is much larger and much stranger than we are led to believe. And tomorrow we will journey even deeper into the darkness. We will look for a colony that carved a single word into a tree and disappeared into history.